Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sade. I am non-binary, I use they, them pronouns, and today we are going to talk about why labels in the LGBTQ plus community are so confusing, why I love labels, and why I hate labels. If you have ever been overwhelmed or confused by labels within our community, you are not alone. Labels can be some of the most empowering things that we can do for ourselves, but they can also be very confusing and they can be overwhelming. Labeling ourselves can help us find a sense of community and can help us find a better sense of ourselves, but they can also be very stressful, and it can come down to societal pressure from ourselves, the textbook definition confusion, and everything that goes along with it. So that is what we're going to dive deeper in today. Let's get started. So first I'm going to talk about why labels can be so powerful, so empowering, and why I love them. Whenever somebody comes out of the closet, they typically attach themselves to a specific label, whether that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual. It can be within gender, with non-binary, transgender, agender, genderqueer. There are so many beautiful labels, but when you come out of the closet, you pretty much, for the most part, in my opinion and my experience, attach yourself to a specific label. Now, these labels exist to help us feel understood and validated, especially within our own community, and it does help within the coming out process because you can tell somebody, hi, I'm a lesbian, I just wanted to let you know, and they probably know what that means. It can help them have a better understanding of who you are. Labels can empower you. For a lot of people, when they identify with a label or a set of labels, they feel like they're living their authentic truth. They're being their authentic self, and they can be recognized for that label. The labels that you identify with can also help you find a community that shares similar experiences to you and similar backstories, and it can help you find an even closer sense of community that sometimes ends up feeling like family. Labels can also help affirm you. For me specifically, my label as non-binary really affirms my gender. It brings me gender euphoria, and it helps me feel like I'm living my authentic truth, and that word truly feels like my authentic self. Using labels can also reduce the feeling of isolation. I know that when I was in the closet, I felt so alone because I thought that there was not a single person out in this whole entire world that felt the same way that I did and identified the same way I did. I felt literally so isolated in the closet, and when I came out and I identified with specific labels, which for me are lesbian and non-binary, I realized that I'm not alone and that there are so many people in such a beautiful community of people who identify the exact same way I do and have these shared experiences, which made me feel less alone and honestly helped save my life. And that is honestly one of the most beautiful things that I love about labels, is that for me and for a lot of people, it saves lives. Identifying as labels and finding a community and realizing that you're not weird, you're not different, you're not alone is literally life-saving. Like, I don't think people understand how life-saving labels can be because of the community and the reduction of self-isolation that it can create. And in my personal experience, and from what I've heard a lot of other people talk about, identifying with labels and labeling yourself can feel like a huge step towards self-acceptance and discovering who you are, and it can be a huge step in your journey through life. Like, if you're watching this and you've ever been in the closet for any part of the LGBTQ plus community, you know that feeling of isolation. You know that feeling of feeling alone and feeling weird and different and feeling like you don't belong and that there's not a community out there for you. But then you come out and you realize that there is a beautiful community of people who are just like you and who identify the same way and who have similar experiences, and it literally helps you feel like you have your own community. Like, for me personally, as a lesbian and specifically as non-binary, when I find other lesbian and specifically other non-binary people, I feel like I've found my people. I feel like these people can relate to me on a deeper level than literally anybody else, and we just have more in common. We can share similar stories, we can make similar jokes to each other. We just have that very common similarity that goes way deeper than me and a cisgender person might have. But I just feel like personally, I wouldn't have this similar sense of community or feeling of chosen family with these people if labels weren't in the picture. Those are some of the reasons why I love labels and why I feel like labels can be super empowering. I'm interested to hear in the comment section why you love labels and why you feel like they're empowering, specifically in your life with your experience. I think that we all have a different experience with labels, but now we're gonna shift towards why I hate labels and why I think they're very restricting and why they're confusing and all of the complexity that comes into identifying with specific labels. Specific labels can feel very confining because they may not capture the fluidity of somebody's self-identity and self-expression when it comes to their sexuality or gender. People who experience gender or sexuality and attraction outside of the traditional frameworks of these definitions may not feel like these labels fit their journey or their experience. There's also the pressure to conform, right? There are so many stereotypes out there and people will literally put labels onto you. I remember when I was in college, people loved to define me as a bisexual, and this is while I was still in the closet. The reason why they did that is because they saw me for somebody who liked women. I didn't see it for myself, but apparently they did, but they also saw me and my attraction that I had to men. So they socially defined me as a bisexual without my permission, just doing it truly based off of stereotypes and who they thought that I was. There's also this societal pressure that you feel like you might need to fit in to society and be exactly who they want you to be. I remember I had an ex-girlfriend who literally looked me in the face and said, "You're not non-binary, they them pronouns aren't who you are. You are not non-binary." And I was like, you know what, you're right, I'm not. Because sometimes it truly feels easier to be what people want you to be than to live your true authentic self. Labels can sometimes reduce complex and nuanced identities into oversimplified categories that literally just miss the richness of somebody's full experience. For me, that looks like being a non-binary lesbian, because for me, I know that non-binary lesbians are valid, they exist, and they've existed for a long time within our community. But people who just look at lesbian and non-binary think, you can't be lesbian and non-binary because lesbian is a woman-loving woman, and non-binary means you're not a man and you're not a woman, so you can't be the same thing. Because these are oversimplified ideas of these labels that don't include the full experience and the full history of our LGBTQ plus community. The LGBTQ plus community is inherently diverse because it acknowledges a wide range of sexual identities, expressions, and gender identities. And this is something that I am super passionate about, okay? Labels are going to feel confusing because people are only going to read and look at the textbook definitions of these labels. Textbook definitions are oversimplified. They are not inclusive of our history of our community, and they were most likely written by like straight cisgendered men who needed to come up with a definition for their dictionary. I hate textbook definitions of labels. If you want to find the true definitions of labels, you need to read and look up your queer history and go deeper into how these labels actually originated and what they actually mean for our community. Because if somebody just looks at a textbook definition of a lesbian, they're gonna see woman loving woman. But if you look into lesbian history and you read about it, you will know lesbian history includes so many different types of people and it is so beautiful, but you will not understand that complexity of the definition if you just look at a dictionary. Now, this also leads into why labels can be so confusing because of all the complexities that we just spoke about. But also, we exist in a world where our languages are constantly and consistently changing. Our languages are constantly evolving, which can also mean that the labels that we are using to describe ourselves within the LGBTQ plus community are also evolving. Now, this is kind of like a blessing and a curse, right? It's a blessing because I think that languages should be evolving, and I think that labels should be evolving because we as a community, as we come out and we become more fluid and more diverse and we find new experiences that we live, we want those labels and we want those definitions to evolve with us. It can also be a little bit like, because you might feel like you identify as one thing, but due to the evolving language and complexities of all of that, you might now identify with something else, which can lead into a whole gender crisis or sexuality crisis. I've been there, trust me, I know. It can be really confusing. There's also the topic of intersectionality. There's the intersection of different identities. There's race, there's religion, age, ability, gender, sexuality. Someone who is religious, someone who is Black, someone who is disabled are going to have different experiences than someone who is white, non-religious, and able-bodied. There's also cultural and regional differences within the LGBTQ plus community. Somebody in America is gonna have a different experience than somebody who lives in India, and they're going to have a different experience than somebody who lives in China, and they're going to have a different experience than somebody who lives in South America. Like, there's just the regional and cultural differences that occur within our community as well. For example, the word queer might be derogatory in one region, but in another region, it is reclaimed. There's also this understanding that not everybody uses labels the same way, especially labels that encapture fluidity, such as gender fluid, gender queer, the word queer. Like, there's just so many different labels that we can use to explain our fluidity of our gender or sexuality experience, and nobody is going to use those labels the exact same because they encapture fluidity, which is fluid, which is never static, and that can cause confusion as well. So as we've discussed, there's a lot of pros and cons to using labels. There's a lot of beautiful things that come with labeling yourself, such as finding community, finding you as yourself, realizing who you are, being able to express how you feel inside, and verbally expressing that outwardly to other people. It's just a lot of beautiful things that come along with labels. But as we've also talked about, it can be very confusing, and there are so many different, diverse, and different ways that you can identify with labels that don't always fit the textbook definitions. If you are confused, if you are confused about labels with gender or sexuality and you don't know how to identify because society is telling you one thing but the community is telling you another thing, and you feel pressure on yourself to fit into certain labels, you are not alone. I still completely feel all of these feelings. I feel like I have such a beautiful community as a non-binary person, and I think that there's so many things that I love about being non-binary and using that label to describe myself. But I also feel like there is a lot of complexities and cons that come with identifying as a non-binary lesbian. In my community in real life, I am so accepted and loved for being a non-binary lesbian, but on the internet, I am literally hated for it. Like, all of my hate comments are about me being a non-binary lesbian and how those two identities can't exist together, but they can. So there are a lot of pros, a lot of cons, but now we're gonna talk about how you can respect other people's labels and identities. Because our community is so fluid, you are not going to experience gender or sexuality in the same way that other people are. You can have two lesbians standing right next to each other and they are going to experience their lesbianism in two completely different ways. Nobody's journey is going to be the exact same. Some might be more similar than others, but no two journeys are the exact same. That also goes with gender. Two non-binary people are not going to experience gender in the same way. I'm gonna have a different set of dysphorias and euphorias than somebody else who's non-binary who's standing next to me. There's going to be femme, masc, androgynous non-binary people. There's going to be AFAB and AMAB non-binary people. There is also the fluidity of people who identify as queer or gender queer, gender fluid. There's so many different ways to identify with these labels. Please, 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 if I could give you one piece of advice for the 27, almost 28 years that I have been living, is that you need to live your life for you. I used to live my life for other people. I used to sleep with men because that's what society told me that I was supposed to do. I lived most of my life identifying as a woman using she, her pronouns because that's what I thought that I was supposed to do. But then I had this realization that one day, hopefully, I'm going to be very old and I'm going to be sitting there and I'm going to be thinking about my life. I'm going to be looking back at my life, and I want to, when I look back at my life, think, I'm really proud of myself because I lived my life for me. I don't want to be really old and look back at my life and go, I have so many regrets. I wish that I lived my life for me, because instead of doing that, I lived my life for other people. When I had that realization, I truly realized that I don't care about the awkward interactions that I'm going to have with people in everyday life, and I don't care about the hate comments because that is temporary. That you're gonna see and it's gonna suck and it's gonna hurt. But at the end of your life, you are gonna remember more of the beautiful and the good than you're going to remember the hurt. Instead of me looking back at my life and going, wow, I'm so upset that I had all of these hate comments. I'm so sad that I came out as non-binary and a lesbian so proudly online and in real life. I'm gonna look back at my life and go, I am so proud that I lived my authentic truth as an outwardly non-binary lesbian, that I lived proud in my identity, and that I found such a beautiful community and chosen family through identifying that way. There's also the need to respect other people's identities regardless of how you feel about that identity. There are people out there who will not respect pronouns because they don't get it. Truly, I don't care if you don't get pronouns. You just need to respect and at least try to understand them, okay? Speak to non-binary people, do your research, go out there and ask people about pronouns, and you will realize that we are really no different than you. We want to live life the same way as you, and that we aren't asking to be seen differently or we don't want special attention. We are just using a different set of pronouns to describe ourselves and our gender journey than you are, and that's okay. There's also personal choice. People have the right and the freedom to live their life the way that they want to. You are not allowed to tell somebody how to live their life. You cannot tell people how to identify. And I encourage you that if you do, even if it's in a jokingly manner, tell people that, oh, you're such a lesbian. If they're bisexual because maybe they haven't been with a man in a while, do not say that. That joke is not helpful. They are still bisexual. Unless that person comes to you and comes out as a different label and different sexuality, you need to respect their personal choice. The LGBTQ plus community is literally built on love and acceptance for you being exactly how you want to identify and who you want to love, what gender you want to identify as. We are literally a community built on love and acceptance. We need to stand together more than we ever have. We need to stick together, we need to love one another, and we need to protect each other now more than ever. Protecting each other may look like just standing up for each other. A way that you can protect one another is introduce yourself with your name and your pronouns, especially if you are cisgender. Please, 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 coming from a non-binary person, if you are introducing yourself, say, for example, hi, my name is Sarah, she, her pronouns. That will literally help create a safe space for people who are non-binary and trans to be able to sit there and go, hi, my name is Sade, they, them pronouns. Like, literally, that one thing can mean the world to the non-binary and trans community. Another thing that you can do to help respect one another is to educate yourself. Do research outside of textbook definitions. Maybe watch videos on people who identify as trans or non-binary, who identify as a non-binary lesbian, who identify as bisexual and who use neo-pronouns. I really think it's important to do your research outside of textbook definitions and look into the community and be friends with and communicate with people who identify differently than you. All right, my friends, I know that we covered a lot of information in a very short period of time, but if you liked this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment in the comment section down below. I would love to continue this discussion into the comment sections. Leave open and honest responses about how you feel about gender, sexuality, and labels. And all that I ask is that if we're gonna have a conversation down below in the comment section, that you remain open and open-minded and respectful to those who might have different experiences than yourself. I love you so much, my friends. I know that Thanksgiving is coming up and the holiday season is arising. So if you are going home to your family, please, please, please be safe. Please take care of yourselves, do self-care, take care of yourself however you feel necessary. I know that going home for the holidays is a very tough thing, especially if you are in the closet or your family doesn't respect your name, your gender, your pronouns, your sexuality. So please, please, please take care of yourself. I love you, you are not alone, and we are in this together. Bye, my friends.